This edition of Things I Can Live Without is brought to you by ThrowdownFantasy.com. Think you know the fight game? Play boxing's only draft-style fantasy game, ThrowdownFantasy.com. Draft fighters, track stats, and win money. Hi everybody, Al Bernstein here with another one of my Things I Can Live Without features. Now, this is the part where the normal, optimistic, looking through rose-colored glasses Al Bernstein is replaced by the one that's a little more caustic. The first thing that I can live without, I have to say, is a full-blown Don King press conference. And why am I discussing that now? Well, because just recently, this past week in fact, there was a press conference for the Berman-Stiverne-Chris Arreola heavyweight matchup, and Don King was the promoter of Berman-Stiverne. During the course of that press conference, which was handled by Dan Goosen of Goosen Tudor and by King, we saw Don King, who has not had this spotlight for some time, grab as much of it as is humanly possible. And when Don King does that, depending on your outlook, he is either wildly amusing or absurdly pedantic and time-wasting. I kind of fall into the absurdly pedantic and time-wasting camp because I've heard Don King. You know, I have 30-some years of boxing. I've attended, especially in the old days when King was one of the major figures in boxing, I attended all those press conferences and had to sit through hours and hours and hours of his monologues. I've actually lost 4 years of my life to Don King's press conferences. So for me, I'm hoping that however this moves forward, that we don't see press conferences in which Don King is the sole promoter. I don't wish him any ill will as a promoter. I hope things go well for Don, but I can't live through more of the press conferences in which Don King is the sole moderator and chews the scenery for 2 or 3 hours. Next on my list of things I can live without are the detractors of the great Joe Calzaghe. Now, Joe Calzaghe is set to be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in June, and because of that, people have come out of the woodwork again to detract from the great record that Joe Calzaghe had. Now, of course, he was a great Welch champion who ended his career 46-0. 46-0. That's pretty impressive. And he was, of course, the 168-pound champion for, it seems, 3 or 4 presidential administrations. In fact, that's true, because he was undefeated his whole career. For 15 years, he remained undefeated. He was 9-0 against former or current world champions and was an extraordinary fighter. But for some reason, because he fought so much of his career in the UK, and fought many of the mandatories that he had to face. And some people have criticized the level of his opposition and feel somehow that he is not a Hall of Fame fighter. Well, I voted for Joe Calzaghe for the Hall of Fame. I wrote the story that will appear in the International Boxing Hall of Fame program. And I am an unabashed admirer of Joe Calzaghe. I believe that he did everything that is expected of a Hall of Fame fighter. Very few, a handful of fighters, have remained undefeated on a world-class stage over that many fights. It was an extraordinary achievement. I was there when he fought Jeff Lacey. We broadcast that fight on Showtime. A fight which I will remind everyone, Calzaghe was a big underdog in. Lacey had won the IBF version of the crown and was taking on Calzaghe in Manchester, and about 90% of the media people there, especially from the United States, thought that Jeff Lacey was going to win. I was one of those people that felt Joe Calzaghe had more than a good chance to win, and as it turned out, he delivered a performance that was so astonishing, it was one of the most lopsided 12-round wins that I have ever seen. And add to that his great win over Mikkel Kessler in front of 50,000 fans in Cardiff, Wales, when Kessler was absolutely at the top of his game and also undefeated in almost 40 fights. And that's pretty extraordinary. And then he went on to beat Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. to top off his career. So for me, Joe Calzaghe is a true Hall of Famer, and I can live without the people that say he's not. The last thing that I can live without are the folks that have Doomsday Predictions for the year 2014 for boxing. Now, 2013 was, in my opinion, one of the best years boxing's had in the past quarter century. This year has started out much slower. We've had some decent matches. We haven't had a lot of great matches yet. And some people, when they look at some of the schedule that's planned for the middle part of this year, there are clearly some very good fights there, but also some that on paper may not stack up as great fights, though you certainly hope they will be. I am fully in acknowledgement of the fact that 2014 has had a much slower start than the previous year. I also look at those fights, some of them on the books, and say, hopefully they'll be better in some cases than they look on paper. But I'm telling you, don't write this year off yet. And for the folks that are already doing that, I think they're making a big mistake, because there are still many good fights already planned and a number that will materialize in the last 2 quarters of this year. So even though this is the feature in which I'm usually a little more negative, in a way I'm being more positive, because I'm looking at boxing through those rose-colored glasses for 2014. And I promise you, if this year does not live up to its expectations, I will be the first one to say so here on the Boxing Channel.